It began on one of those quintessential autumn nights, the kind where the air is crisp, carrying the scent of burning wood and roasted marshmallows. Our parents had gathered for their usual bonfire in our friend's backyard, a monthly tradition that let them unwind and share stories. We kids were left to our own devices, exploring the night with the kind of reckless abandon that only a teenager can muster. On this particular evening, Max, Lily, and I decided to push the boundaries of our freedom. It was a rare occasion that all three of us were together, so we wanted to make the most of it. We ventured out around 9 p.m., planning to walk the reckless tracks and maybe goof off near the highway. It sounds stupid now, but at the time, it felt like an adventure. The night was shrouded in darkness, with only the faint glow of distant streetlights breaking through the black. Our phone flashlights were the only source of light as we navigated the uneven terrain of the railroad. The tracks ran parallel to a swamp that eventually gave way to a dense forest, the perfect setting for ghost stories and childhood dares. We were about halfway to the highway when we started to feel uneasy. It was the kind of gut feeling that sends shivers down your spine and makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched. I slowed down, my flashlight scanning the reeds that lined the swamp beside the tracks. The railroad had a steep drop-off with rocks leading down to the swamp, creating a natural barrier that was both treacherous and mysterious. As my flashlight beam cut through the darkness, it landed on something that would make my blood run cold. Crouched in the reeds, just at the end of the drop-off, was a figure unlike anything I had ever seen. Its face was a blank canvas, smooth and white, with no eyes, nose, or mouth. The only features were faint cheekbones that gave it a hauntingly skeletal appearance. Its body was grotesquely slender and long, almost unnaturally so. If it had stood up, it would have been at least 7 feet tall. For a moment, I was paralyzed with fear, my flashlight fixed on this inhuman creature. Then, as quickly as I had seen it, the figure darted back into the shadows of the reeds, moving with a speed that was almost a blur. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a scream building in my throat. Lily and Max, sensing my terror and seeing the creature's rapid retreat, started to panic. Without a word, we turned and ran, our footsteps pounding against the gravel of the railroad as we headed for the safety of a nearby parking lot. The lot belonged to a series of warehouses and businesses, and while the route through it was longer, it was better lit, offering a sense of security that the darkened tracks did not. The reality of what we had seen began to sink in. Lily, ever the practical one, picked up a brick from the edge of the parking lot for self-defense. The simple act was oddly comforting, a small measure of control in an otherwise terrifying situation. Our breaths come in ragged grasp as we navigate the maze of warehouses and business lots, the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. Despite the relative safety of the light, the fear didn't abate. If anything, it intensified. We could hear rustling noises and the sound of shuffling feet that seemed to follow us, keeping pace with our panicked steps. It might have been our paranoia playing tricks on us, but the sound felt all too real. We finally reached a small pathway that led back into our neighborhood, a shortcut that connected the railroad tracks to the street we lived on. As we stepped onto this familiar pavement, I felt a sense of relief, but it was quickly overshadowed by the fear that whatever we had seen might still be following us. We rushed back to the house where our friends were still gathered around the dying embers of the bonfire. Bursting through the door, we must have looked like we'd seen a ghost. As we caught our breath, we began to recount the night's events, our words tumbling over each other in a frantic attempt to explain what had just happened. As we pieced together our story, more details emerged. Lily mentioned that earlier, while we were by the highway, she heard strange noises but dismissed them as the rustling of animals or wind in the trees. Now, it seemed clear that those noises were more sinister, Max confirmed that he had too seen the creature, or at least the movement of his retreat, which validated my own terrifying experience. We sat there, huddled together in the dim light of the living room, trying to make sense of what we had seen. The fear lingered long after the adrenaline had faded, a haunting reminder of the faceless creature in the reeds. None of us slept well that night, the image of the inhuman figure etched into our minds. In the days that followed, we avoided the railroad tracks and the swamp. The memory of that night became a dark legend among our friends, a story that we would recount in hushed tones, each of us adding our own details and embellishments. But no matter how we told it, the core of the story remained the same. Something lurked in the darkness that night, something that defied explanation and left us forever changed. Even now, years later, the thought of that smooth, faceless face sends chills down my spine. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear in our childhood might just be real, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And as for that night, well, it was just the beginning of the terror that will haunt our dreams.